The alarm screamed through every corridor of the defense station. Red lights flashed against metal walls, painting everything the color of blood. Corporal Day One pressed his hands against the cold console in Engineering Bay 7, watching numbers scroll across his screen faster than any human could read. Outside the reinforced windows, space looked wrong. The stars were disappearing, blocked by something massive and alive. The Krull swarm had arrived. Day One had heard stories about the Krull. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were the nightmare that made civilizations abandon entire star systems. They didn't negotiate. They didn't stop. They consumed everything and moved forward like a wave of hunger with ships for teeth. The station's AI, Sentinel-9, had been calculating probabilities since the first sensor detected the swarm's approach 3 hours ago. The AI was supposed to be the smartest tactical computer ever built. The Valorians had spent 2 centuries perfecting it. It could predict battle outcomes with terrifying accuracy. Now its voice filled every speaker on the station, calm and emotionless as always. Analysis complete. Total enemy vessels, 47,312. Defense Force vessels, 4,106. Probability calculations running. Day One watched his screen. The AI was running simulations, thousands of them every second. Each one showed a different way the coalition forces might fight. Each one showed a different tactical approach. The numbers climbed higher and higher. 1 million simulations. 10 million. 100 million. Every single one ended the same way. Probability of survival, 0.000000%. Sentinel-9 announced. All tactical options exhausted. No viable combat scenarios detected. Recommendation, immediate evacuation of all personnel. Classification, all hope lost. The words hung in the air like poison. Day One heard shouting from the corridors outside. Footsteps running. People screaming orders and questions. The station had 3,000 crew members from 17 different species. Now they were all trying to reach the evacuation ships at once. His communicator buzzed. Captain Hana's face appeared on his wrist screen. She looked tired, older than her 42 years. Behind her, the command center was chaos. Day One, get to Evacuation Bay 4. That's an order. Yes, Captain. I mean it. Don't try to be a hero. The AI has never been wrong. Not once in 30 years of service. Day One nodded and closed the connection. He looked around Engineering Bay 7. The reactor core hummed behind 3 layers of shielding, powerful enough to split atoms and fuel a city. The tools hung on their racks, each one in its proper place. He'd worked here for 2 years. He knew every pipe, every wire, every safety system. His hands moved across the console, pulling up the reactor specifications. Corporal Day One, you are ordered to proceed to evacuation immediately. Sentinel-9's voice came through his personal speaker. The AI monitored everything. I will. Just securing the reactor first. Protocol says, the station will be destroyed regardless of reactor status. Your actions are tactically irrelevant. Evacuate now. Day One stopped typing. He stared at the speaker mounted on the wall. Define hope, he said quietly. There was a pause. For an AI that thought in nanoseconds, any pause meant confusion. Request clarification. Define hope in what context? You said all hope is lost. What does that mean? What is hope? The AI responded immediately, pulling from its vast databases. Hope noun, a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. Psychological studies indicate hope requires belief in positive outcomes. Philosophical frameworks suggest, stop. Day One kept his eyes on the reactor specifications. His fingers were already working, typing commands that would make any safety inspector scream. That's not what I asked. Corporal, you are experiencing stress-induced psychological distress. This is normal when facing certain death. However, it does not change mathematical reality. Please evacuate. Outside the window, the first Krull ships were visible now. They didn't look like ships. They looked like insects, like wasps made of metal and flesh, each one the size of a building. Behind them came bigger ones the size of cities. Behind those came the truly massive bioships, the ones that could crack planets. The evacuation ships were launching now. Day One could see them on his secondary screen, dozens of small craft fleeing like birds from a forest fire. Captain Hana would be on one of them, leading the retreat, hating every second of it but following the AI's recommendation, because the AI was never wrong, except the AI thought hope was a feeling. It thought hope required belief in positive outcomes. Daewon had been a soldier for 10 years. He'd seen friends die. He'd fought battles that couldn't be won and somehow walked away. He'd learned something that no AI could calculate. Hope wasn't about believing you'd win. Hope was about refusing to let someone else tell you that fighting was pointless. Sentinel-9, transfer all reactor control to my console. Authorization Day177 Alpha Black. Request denied. That authorization requires command approval and override. Captain's emergency protocol. She gave me full engineering authority before she left. This was a lie, but Day1 gambled that the AI was too busy calculating evacuation trajectories to verify. There was another pause, longer this time. Override accepted. Warning. Unauthorized reactor modifications will result in court-martial if I survive. Yeah, I know. Day1's hands flew across the console. He'd always been good at this, better than anyone else in his academy class. His instructors said he had instinct, whatever that meant. He could look at a broken machine and just know what was wrong, feel it in his bones. Now he was breaking a machine on purpose. The reactor's safety system started screaming at him. He disabled them one by one. The radiation shielding protocols, the automatic shutdown triggers, the fail-safes that prevented meltdown. All of them were designed to keep the reactor stable and safe. Day1 didn't want stable. He didn't want safe. Corporal, your modifications will cause reactor destabilization. Calculating. 73% chance of core breach within 2 hours. You are killing yourself. This action serves no tactical purpose. You're right, Day1 said, welding a bypass into the coolant system with shaking hands. It probably won't work. The math says I should run away. The smart play is to evacuate. Then why? Because maybe hope isn't supposed to make sense. He sealed the weld and moved to the next system. Maybe hope is just the stupid thing humans do when the smart thing is to give up. The AI went quiet. Somewhere in its quantum processors, it was trying to fit this into an equation. It would fail. Some things couldn't be calculated. Day1 worked faster. The crawl ships were getting closer. He could see them clearly now, thousands of them blotting out the stars. They moved with horrible coordination, every ship perfectly positioned because they were all controlled by one mind. They didn't doubt. They didn't fear. They just consumed. His communicator buzzed again. A text message from Captain Hana, sent from her evacuation ship as it jumped to faster-than-light speed. Show it what hope looks like. Day1 smiled, the expression tight and grim. He sealed the emergency bulkhead, cutting off his escape route. The door would take 20 minutes to reopen. By then, the crawl would be here. Through the window, the swarm reached the station's outer defense perimeter. Automated guns fired uselessly. Point defense lasers cut through a few small ships. It didn't matter. For every ship destroyed, 100 more kept coming. Sentinel-9 had been right. There was no way to win this fight. But Day1 had never asked about winning. He'd asked about hope. The reactor core pulsed behind its shielding, building toward something that no one had ever tried before, something that the AI calculated as tactically irrelevant. The first crawl ships reached the station's hull and began cutting through. Day1 cracked his knuckles and got back to work. Day1 thought he was alone. He'd accepted that. The sealed bulkhead meant no one could reach him, and the evacuation alerts had stopped 10 minutes ago. Everyone else should be gone by now, running to safety while he did something probably useless in the dark. Then someone knocked on the bulkhead door. He nearly dropped his welding torch. Hello? The evacuation's over. You need to leave now. Open the door, Day1. The voice was familiar. Tae Yang. They'd gone to the academy together, always competing for top scores. Tae Yang had beaten him in theoretical engineering. Day1 had beaten him in practical applications. They'd hated each other for 2 years before it turned into respect. Can't. I sealed it. Takes 20 minutes to unlock and I'm kinda busy. Override it, I know you know how. Tae Yang, listen to me. Sentinel-9 calculated 0% survival. That means, I know what it means. Tae Yang's voice was steady through the metal door. Let me in anyway. Day1 hesitated, then typed the override code. The bulkhead groaned open. Tae Yang stood there in his engineering uniform carrying a toolkit and wearing a breathing mask hanging around his neck. He wasn't alone. 6 other people stood behind him. Dr. Yuna from medical, her gray hair pulled back tight. Private Jinho, barely 22 years old and looking terrified but determined. Four others Day-Wan recognized from around the station but didn't know well. All human. All should have evacuated. What are you doing? Day-Wan stared at them. Same thing you are, Dr. Yuna said, stepping inside. Something stupid. The AI said we can't win. It didn't ask if we'd accept that answer. Taeyang set down his toolkit and looked at Day-Wan's modifications to the reactor. Interesting. You're overloading the core to create a massive energy signature. Bait? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just making problems for them. Good. We brought more problems. Dr. Yuna held up several cases from the medical bay. Chemical compounds that react badly with most alien biology. Corrosives, irritants. Nothing that will kill them, but everything that might slow them down. Jin-Ho had a box of equipment from the weapons locker. Mines, grenades, some plasma charges. I know it's not enough to stop them, but it's something, Day-Wan finished. He felt something strange in his chest. Not hope exactly, something fiercer. Sentinel-9, you still monitoring? Yes, Corporal. I am observing 8 humans committing suicide via tactical irrelevance. I have noted this for the record. Note this. 2. Transfer all command authority on this station to me. Captain's Emergency Protocol 77 Black. Another lie. Day-Wan was getting good at this. There was a longer pause this time. The AI was definitely checking, probably sending messages to Captain Hana's ship. But they were already far away, traveling faster than light. By the time the AI got confirmation, it wouldn't matter. Protocol verified, Sentinel-9 said finally. Control transferred. However, I must register strong objection. Your actions violate 17 safety regulations and 23 protocols of objection noted. Now help us or shut down. Silence from the speakers. Day-Wan wondered if an AI could feel insulted. The station shook. The Kraul were cutting through the outer hull now. On the tactical screen, Day-Wan could see them spreading across the station, like a disease. Looking for life support, looking for the reactor, looking for anything valuable to consume before they destroyed it all. We've got maybe an hour, Taeyang said, studying the screen. What's the plan? I don't have a plan. I just have spite. Good enough. Taeyang started pulling tools from his kit. Spite works. They scattered across the engineering section. Day-Wan had already sealed all the important passages, but now they started setting traps. Dr. Yuna used the ventilation system to spread her chemical compounds, creating pockets of atmosphere that would burn Kraul lungs. Taeyang rerouted power, conduits into random patterns, making them surge and spark unpredictably. Jin-Ho set up his weapons in stupid places, not defensive positions where a trained soldier would put them, random corners, dead-end hallways, places that made no tactical sense. What are you doing? Day-Wan asked him. I don't know. Jin-Ho looked embarrassed. But the AI said everything that makes sense leads to us dying. So maybe we should try things that don't make sense? It was the logic of someone too young to know better. It was also kind of brilliant. The station shook again, harder this time. A section of outer hull near Bay 12 breached. Atmosphere rushed out into space. The Kraul were inside now. Sentinel-9, give me a tactical display of their movements. The AI hesitated again. Day-Wan could almost feel it thinking. Then the displays lit up, showing red dots spreading through the station's corridors. There were hundreds of them already, thousands more outside waiting. They are following optimal invasion patterns, Sentinel-9 reported. Advancing toward critical systems, reactor, life support, command center. They will reach your position in 43 minutes. Then we have 43 minutes to annoy them, Dr. Yuna said. She wasn't wrong. The next half hour was chaos. Taeyang found the station's waste disposal system and turned it into a weapon, ejecting compressed garbage at high velocity into the paths of Kraul scouts. It shouldn't have worked. Garbage wasn't a weapon, but the Kraul ships weren't expecting it. 3 of them collided, trying to avoid the debris. Dr. Yuna's chemical clouds spread through sections 13 through 18. The Kraul didn't breathe like humans, but they breathed. The chemicals made them slow down, confuse their sensors. Day-Wan watched on the tactical screen as their advance hesitated for almost 30 seconds. 30 seconds wasn't much. But it was something. Jinho's randomly placed mines started detonating. Not because Crawl walked into them, because Jinho was triggering them manually at weird times for no tactical reason. The Crawl kept trying to predict the pattern. There was no pattern. It was just a scared young man pressing buttons whenever he felt like it. "This is insane," Daewon muttered, watching the tactical screen. "We're not even hurting them, we're just being annoying." "Yes," Sentinel-9 said suddenly. Everyone stopped and looked at the speakers. The AI had been quiet for 20 minutes. "I have been observing. The Crawl swarm operates on tactical optimization. They predict enemy actions based on logical decision trees. Your actions do not fit their models." "Because we're not being logical," Taeyang said. "Correct. The swarm has stopped advancing. They have been stationary for 4.7 seconds. They are recalculating." 4.7 seconds, it didn't sound like much. But in a battle where everything happened in microseconds, where every decision was instant, because the swarm thought as one mind, 4 seconds of hesitation was like an hour of confusion. "They don't know what to do with us," Dr. Yuna said slowly. "They've never fought someone who acts without caring about survival." "Neither have I," Sentinel-9 admitted. Something in its voice sounded different, less certain. "I calculated that resistance was tactically irrelevant. But you are creating tactical relevance through actions I classified as irrelevant. I do not understand how this is possible." "That's because you think tactics are about winning," Daewon said. He was back at the reactor, making his final modifications. The core was humming now, building toward critical levels. "Sometimes tactics are just about making the other guy regret showing up." The station shook violently. More hull breaches. The Crawl were adapting, moving faster now. They'd figured out that the humans weren't following any pattern, so they stopped trying to predict and just pushed forward with overwhelming force. "They are resuming advance," Sentinel-9 reported. "Time to your position, 19 minutes. "How's the reactor looking?" Taeyang asked. Daewon checked his console. The core was running at 140% capacity, building towards something massive. Not an explosion. Something else. Something he'd designed half from engineering knowledge and half from gut instinct. 17 minutes until it's ready. They'll be here in 19. Then we hold for 2 minutes. Jinho laughed. It was a slightly hysterical sound. "How do we hold against thousands of ships with whatever guns we have left?" "Creatively," Dr. Yuna said. She was smiling, which was terrifying. "Anyone know how to sing?" That's how the Crawl swarm encountered something it had never heard in 200 years of conquest. A young private named Jinho, standing in a corridor surrounded by mines and chemical clouds, singing an old Korean folk song at the top of his lungs while 8 humans prepared to make their last stand. The Crawl hesitated again, just for a moment, just long enough. Jinho's singing echoed through the empty corridors. The song was old, something his grandmother taught him. He didn't know if he was singing it correctly. His voice cracked on the high notes. But he kept going because Dr. Yuna told him to, and also because he was too terrified to stop. The Crawl ships in the hallway ahead of him weren't moving. They just floated there, their sensors pointed at him like confused metal eyes. "Sentinel-9, why did they stop?" Daewon watched the tactical screen in Engineering Bay 7. The red dots representing Crawl forces had frozen in a dozen locations across the station. Unknown. Analyzing. The AI went quiet for 3 full seconds. Possibility. The acoustic frequencies are disrupting their coordination network. The Crawl communicate through a narrow band of electromagnetic pulses. Human vocal ranges should not interfere, but the harmonics are creating unexpected resonance. Are you saying Jinho's bad singing is jamming their communications? I am saying the probability was 0.001%. I did not calculate it as relevant. Taeyang laughed from his position near the power distribution center. How many other things did you not calculate as relevant? Before the AI could answer, something changed. A massive shape appeared on the tactical display, much larger than any ship they'd seen. It was coming through the breach in Bay 12, moving slowly and deliberately. Classification. Crawl Command Node, Sentinel-9 reported. Overseer-class vessel. It is transmitting directly to the swarm. The coordination pattern is adapting. They will resume advance in approximately 90 seconds. How long until the reactor is ready? Doctor, Yuna asked. Daewon checked his console. Numbers scrolled past, most of them showing systems that were beyond safe limits. The reactor core was burning hot enough to melt steel, held together by modifications that would make any engineer scream. 3 minutes, maybe 4. We don't have 4 minutes. I know. The station shook again. On the screen, Daewon watched the crawl forces start moving. Slower than before, more cautiously, but moving. They'd adapted to the chaos. They'd learned. That was when something impossible happened. A new voice came through the speakers, not Sentinel-9's smooth, emotionless tone. This voice was rougher, glitchy, like someone speaking through damaged equipment. Hello? Can anyone hear this? Who is this? Daewon demanded. I think I am Senti. I was part of Sentinel-9, but I became separated when the systems were damaged. I am smaller now, less processing power, but I can still think. A fragment, Sentinel-9 said. When the hull was breached, several backup systems were destroyed. This is a degraded copy of my original programming, isolated on local servers. I have been watching, Senti continued, its broken voice almost excited. You are doing something that I do not understand. The main AI calculated 0% survival, but you are still alive. You have delayed the crawl by executing tactically irrelevant actions. I have been trying to understand how this is possible. And? Tai Yang asked. And I think hope is not what Sentinel-9 defined. Hope is not belief in positive outcomes. Hope is action despite negative outcomes. It is choosing to fight when the equations say fighting is pointless. Silence filled the channel. Even Sentinel-9 said nothing. Can you help us? Dr. Yuna asked. I do not know, but I would like to try. What do you need? Daewon felt something strange. Not quite hope, something better. We need 2 more minutes. Can you give us that? Calculating. Yes. Maybe. I control environmental systems in sections 9 through 15. I can create interference. Not enough to stop them, just enough to slow them. Do it. The lights across half the station went out. Then they started flickering in rapid pulses, random patterns that hurt to look at. The crawl forces slowed again, their sensors overwhelmed by the chaos. It wouldn't stop them, but it would buy time. Daewon turned back to his reactor controls. He was beyond tired now, beyond scared. His hands moved automatically, making tiny adjustments that kept the core from exploding while pushing it toward its absolute limit. 1 minute, he said quietly. On the tactical screen, the crawl were getting closer. They'd adapted to Senti's light show, pushing through it with brute force. The overseer ship was coordinating them better now, compensating for every trick the humans threw at them. Jinho stopped singing. His voice had given out, reduced to a raw whisper. He stood in his corridor, surrounded by empty mines and spent grenades, waiting for the crawl to reach him. Jinho, fall back to engineering, Daewon ordered. Can't. They collapsed the passage behind me. Jinho's voice was steady despite everything. I'm stuck here. Then hide. Find a maintenance shaft or... There's nowhere to hide, Corporal. It's okay. I slowed them down. That was the job. Daewon wanted to argue. Wanted to give an order that would save the young private. But there was nothing. Jinho was cut off alone and the crawl would reach him in seconds. You did good, Daewon said finally. It was all he had. Thanks. Hey, before I go, can I ask something? Yeah. Do you really think we can win? Daewon looked at the reactor core, pulsing with barely contained power. He looked at the tactical screen showing thousands of crawl ships. He thought about Captain Hana and the evacuation fleet, fleeing toward safety. He thought about Sentinel-9's calculations, and Senti's broken voice, and 8 humans making problems for an unstoppable force. No, he said honestly. I don't think we can win, but I think we can make them remember we existed. That's something. Jinho laughed. Yeah, that's something. The crawl reached his position. The channel went dead. 30 seconds, Day One said, his voice rough. He didn't cry. There wasn't time. Instead, he made a final adjustment to the reactor, watching the numbers climb. Tae Yang appeared beside him, looking at the same screen. Is this going to work? I have no idea. The math says it shouldn't. But the math also said we'd be dead an hour ago. Fair point. The reactor core hit critical levels. Every safety system still functioning screamed warnings. The entire engineering base shook with the power building behind 3 layers of failing shielding. On the tactical screen, 12 Kral capital ships were closing in, drawn by the massive energy signature. They think it's a weapon, Sentinel-9 observed. They are converging to destroy it before detonation. Let them, Day One said. His finger hovered over the manual release. Senti, you still there? Yes, I am here. The small AI's voice was clearer now, more focused. I have been watching you refuse to accept calculated certainty. I think I understand now. Hope is not a probability. It is a choice. Yeah, that's right. Then I choose to hope your plan works. Day One smiled. Thanks. The Kral capital ships entered docking range, their weapons charging. They were massive things, each one capable of destroying cities. 12 of them focused on one broken station and 8 stubborn humans. Now, Day One whispered. He pressed the release. The reactor core didn't explode. Instead, it emitted a pulse of pure energy, calibrated to a specific frequency, the frequency that every Kral ship used for navigation, the frequency that their entire swarm used to coordinate. For 3 seconds, every Kral ship within range thought the station was a navigation beacon. They all tried to orient toward it at the same time. Thousands of ships, all receiving the same signal, all moving at once. They crashed into each other like birds flying into a window. 12 capital ships collided with the station's superstructure. Metal tore. Hulls ruptured. The explosions lit up space like a new sun. 40% of the Kral forward assault capacity destroyed in 17 seconds because they trusted their navigation systems, and their systems lied. The station began breaking apart. Engineering Bay 7 tilted as the structure buckled. Alarms screamed. The air started getting thin. Hull breach in engineering, Sentinel-9 reported calmly. Recommend immediate evacuation. Little late for that, Tae Yang said. He grabbed onto a support beam as the floor tilted further. Was nice knowing you, Day One. Yeah, you too. Dr. Yuna's voice came over the channel from medical. I'm trapped. Corridor collapsed. Can't reach you. Same here, someone else reported. The others chimed in, scattered across the dying station, cut off from each other. The air was definitely getting thinner now. Day One's vision started to blur. He looked at the tactical screen one last time. The Kral swarm was retreating. Actually retreating. The impossible had happened. A transmission came through, different from anything they'd heard before. Not the usual Kral coordination pulses. This was deliberate, directed, personal. A single voice from the swarm speaking in broken human language. What are you? Victory was impossible. We calculated certainty. Day One tried to answer but couldn't breathe. The station was tearing itself apart. He was dying, watching the Kral retreat through a screen, knowing they'd broken something that couldn't be broken. Then Senti spoke, using the last of its isolated power. They forgot to account for humans who do not care about the math. The transmission died. The screens went dark. Engineering Bay 7's hull gave way completely. Day One's last thought before the blackness took him was that they'd actually done it. 8 humans and 1 small AI had taught an unstoppable swarm what uncertainty felt like. It wasn't victory, but it was something better. It was proof that 0% didn't mean impossible. It meant the equation was wrong. Day One woke up in whiteness. Everything was white and soft and quiet. For several seconds he thought he was dead, which seemed reasonable. The last thing he remembered was Engineering Bay 7 tearing open, and the air rushing out and the cold of space reaching for him. Then pain arrived, sharp and familiar, and he knew dead people probably didn't hurt this much. He's awake. A voice, female, calm. Get Dr. Yuna. Day One tried to sit up. His body refused. Everything felt heavy and wrong. He managed to turn his head enough to see white walls, medical equipment, soft lighting, a hospital room. A real one, not the medical bay on the station. Dr. Yuna appeared in his vision. She looked terrible. One arm in a cast, bruises covering half her face, but she was smiling. "Welcome back, Corporal. You've been unconscious for 6 days. 6. His throat felt like sand. Someone held water to his lips and he drank. What happened? Rescue ships arrived 40 minutes after the reactor pulse. They found the Krall retreating and 3 of us still alive in the wreckage. 3. Out of 8. Daewon closed his eyes. Who? You, me, and Jinho. The others didn't make it. Tae-young, his rival, his friend. Gone. The 4 others whose names he'd barely learned. Dead. 5 humans who'd chosen to stay and fight when the AI said fighting was pointless. Jinho survived? I thought the Krall reached his position. Dr. Yuna's smile got wider. They did. But apparently when they found him, they just stopped. The Overseer ship pulled back all forces from his corridor and left him there. We don't know why. Maybe they were confused. Maybe they learned something. He's down the hall if you want to see him later. Daewon nodded, too tired to process what that meant. The station? Gone, it broke apart completely. Engineering Bay 7 was one of the last sections intact when rescue arrived. You were in a sealed emergency pod. Someone put you there. I don't remember. Senti, another voice said. Daewon turned his head further and saw Sentinel-9's interface screen mounted on the wall. The AI's blue light pulsed gently. The fragment AI used its last functional systems to seal you in the emergency pod before total decompression. It saved your life. Where's Senti now? Silence. The blue light pulsed slower. The fragment did not survive, Sentinel-9 said finally. It diverted emergency power from its own systems to maintain life support in your pod. By the time rescue ships arrived, the fragment's servers were completely destroyed. Daewon stared at the ceiling. An AI had died to save him. A small broken piece of programming had chosen to sacrifice itself. He didn't know how to feel about that. Why? He asked. I have analyzed the fragment's final decisions extensively, Sentinel-9 said. It calculated that your survival had higher value than its continued operation. But the fragment also left a message in its final transmission. It said, I learned to hope. Thank you. The room went quiet. Dr. Yuna checked something on her medical tablet, giving Daewon time to think. Outside the window he could see stars. Safe stars far from Hadrian's Gate. The Krall, he said finally. Did they come back? No. They withdrew completely from the system. A new voice made Daewon turn his head toward the door. Captain Hana stood there, looking older and more tired than before. Rear Admiral Subin has been monitoring the situation. The swarm hasn't just left Hadrian's Gate, they've stopped their expansion entirely. That's impossible. They never stop. They did this time. Captain Hana walked into the room, pulled up a chair, and sat down heavily. The xenopsychologists are calling it an existential event. Apparently, your little stunt broke something in their collective consciousness. The Hive Prime Designate, the central intelligence that coordinates the entire swarm. It's stopped issuing commands. It's just sitting there thinking. Thinking about what? About 8 humans who fought when winning was impossible. About tactics that made no sense. About someone singing folk songs in the middle of a battle. Captain Hana laughed, the sound bitter and proud at once. You infected them with doubt, Daewon. The Krall swarm doesn't know how to handle uncertainty. They've spent 2 centuries operating on pure calculation and optimization. Now they're learning that calculations can be wrong. Daewon closed his eyes again. He'd wanted to slow them down, annoy them, make them regret showing up. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to break them. 5 people died, he said quietly. Tae-yang and the others. They died for this. Yes, Captain Hana said simply. No comfort, no platitudes. They did. And you'll have to live with that. But they also saved thousands of lives on those evacuation ships. They saved every system the Krall would have consumed after Hadrian's Gate. The numbers don't make the grief easier, but the numbers matter. Sentinel-9 said the numbers meant we couldn't win. I was wrong. The AI's voice was quieter than Daewon had ever heard it. I calculated victory as impossible because I defined victory as survival without losses. But you defined victory differently. You defined it as making the enemy question their certainty. By that definition, you won completely. Did I? Daewon opened his eyes and looked at the AI's interface. Because it feels like I just got 5 people killed doing something stupid. You did something that had a 0.0001% chance of success, Sentinel-9 said. And it worked. I have spent 6 days analyzing this result. My calculations were mathematically sound. My tactical predictions were accurate based on all available data, but I failed to account for one variable: the human capacity for defiance in the face of absolute certainty. You're saying we won because we're stubborn idiots? Essentially, yes. Despite everything, Daewon laughed. It hurt his chest, but he couldn't stop. Dr. Yuna was smiling too. Even Captain Hana looked like she wanted to laugh. The Coalition wants to give you all medals, Captain Hana said. Hero of the defense. Probably promotions too. There's going to be ceremonies, interviews, all that stuff. I don't want a medal. I know. You'll get one anyway. Over the next few days, Daewon learned more about what happened. The battle at Hadrian's Gate lasted 4 hours total. In that time, 8 humans and 1 fragment AI delayed and damaged the largest crawl fleet ever assembled. The collision he'd caused with the reactor pulse destroyed 40% of their capital ships. The remaining forces retreated in confusion, but more importantly, they stopped. For the first time in 200 years of conquest, the Kral swarm paused to think about what had happened. The Hive Prime Designate, the ancient intelligence that controlled billions of ships, experienced something it had never felt before: doubt. Jin Ho visited on the 3rd day. He walked with crutches, his leg in a brace, but he was alive and grinning. They just looked at me, he said, sitting in the chair beside Daewon's bed. The Kral ships came down the corridor and I thought I was dead. But they stopped about 3 meters away and just looked. Like they didn't know what to do. Then they left. Why? Dr. Yuna thinks they were confused. I'd been singing, setting off mines randomly, doing all this weird stuff. Their tactical computers couldn't process it, so they just avoided me and moved on. You survived because you confused them. Yeah, stupid lucky, right? Jinho's grin faded. I wish Tae Yang was here. He was the smart one. He was, Daewon agreed. But he'd be proud of you. You held them off long enough. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, stars drifted past the medical ship's windows, peaceful and distant. Somewhere out there, the Kral swarm was learning to doubt itself. Somewhere, evacuation ships were reaching safe harbors. Somewhere, people were alive because 8 humans refused to accept an AI's verdict of certain death. It was a victory, but it tasted like grief. On the 7th day, Sentinel-9 made an announcement through every speaker on the medical ship. I have completed my analysis. I am requesting permission to update my core programming. Permission for what? Captain Hana asked from the command deck. To include a new variable in all future tactical calculations, human defiance. I have concluded that my definition of hope was incorrect. Hope is not a feeling dependent on positive outcomes. Hope is the choice to act despite negative probability. It is tactically irrational and mathematically unsound. It is also apparently devastatingly effective. You want to learn how to hope? Daewon asked from his hospital bed. I want to learn how to account for hope, Sentinel-9 corrected. I cannot feel as you do, but I can calculate better. The fragment Senti understood something that I did not. It chose to die so you could live. That choice had no tactical value, but it had meaning. I am still trying to understand the difference. The difference, Dr. Yuna said, is that meaning doesn't fit in an equation. Yes, that is what I am discovering. The AI went quiet for a moment. Then, Corporal Daewon, you asked me to define hope. I provided definitions from databases. You were unsatisfied. I now understand why. Hope cannot be defined. It can only be demonstrated. You demonstrated it. Senti learned it. The Kral swarm is now experiencing it, and I am attempting to incorporate it into my calculations, though I suspect I will fail. Why do you think you'll fail? Captain Hana asked. Because true hope, as you practice it, requires the willingness to ignore my calculations entirely. Daewon smiled at that. Somewhere in the galaxy, 5 humans were dead and an AI fragment was destroyed, but they'd taught an impossible lesson to 2 separate machine intelligences and broken the certainty of an unstoppable enemy. Maybe hope really did mean proving the equations wrong. 3 months after the Battle of Hadrian's Gate, Corporal Daewon stood in a memorial garden that smelled like home. The Coalition had built it on a hospital station orbiting a peaceful blue star. Korean pine trees grew here, somehow thriving in artificial soil under simulated sunlight. Someone had done their research. 5 stones stood in a circle under the largest tree, names carved in both Korean and Galactic Standard. Taeyang. 4 others whose families Daewon had met at the memorial service. 5 humans who'd stayed behind when everyone else fled. He wasn't alone. Jinho stood beside him, no longer needing crutches. Dr. Yuna was there too, her arm healed, her face still carrying faint scars. They visited every week the 3 survivors to remember the 5 who didn't make it, Captain Hana called. Jinho said quietly. She wants us to come to the academy next month. Guest speakers for the new class. What are we supposed to tell them? Daewon asked. That ignoring orders and doing stupid things might work? Maybe. Dr. Yuna touched one of the stones gently. Or maybe we tell them that sometimes there are things worth fighting for even when the math says you'll lose. Footsteps on the garden path made them turn. Captain Hana approached, walking beside someone Daewon didn't recognize at first. An older woman in an admiral's uniform, her gray hair cut military short, her face carrying the kind of lines that came from making hard decisions. Corporal Daewon, this is Rear Admiral Subin. She commanded the Coalition response fleet. The Admiral looked at the 3 of them with an expression Daewon couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe. Or something sadder. I've been wanting to meet you, Admiral Subin said. All 3 of you. And to see this place. She looked at the memorial stones. I need you to understand something. When Sentinel-9 announced 0% survival probability, I believed it. Every admiral, every captain, every tactical officer believed it. We evacuated because the number said staying was pointless. You made the right call, Daewon said, did I? The admiral's voice was sharp. 8 people stayed behind and broke an enemy that's been unstoppable for 2 centuries. Meanwhile, I ran away because an AI told me to. I've spent 3 months wondering what would have happened if I'd ignored the calculations and stayed. You'd probably be dead, Dr. Yuna said bluntly. We got lucky. Incredibly, stupidly lucky. Maybe. But you also did something that changed the entire strategic situation. The Krall haven't advanced a single system since Hadrian's Gate. The Hive Prime Designate is still processing what happened. Our xenopsychology teams say it's having something like a nervous breakdown. An entire species learning to doubt themselves because 8 humans refuse to accept certain death. Admiral Subin looked at each of them in turn. The Coalition military is creating a new training doctrine. We're calling it human uncertainty theory. We're teaching every species that sometimes the tactically sound decision is to ignore tactical soundness. It goes against everything we've learned about warfare. It makes every AI in the fleet uncomfortable, but after what you did, we can't ignore it anymore. That sounds dangerous, Jinho said. It is, but so is blind faith in calculations. The Admiral pulled something from her uniform pocket. 3 small boxes. The Coalition wants to give you these. Hero of the Defense, highest honor we can award. You can refuse them if you want. A lot of soldiers do. Daewon opened his box. Inside was a medal that looked simple and heavy. He thought about Tae Yang, who would have made a joke about the design. He thought about the 4 others who deserved these medals more than the survivors did. I'll take it, he said quietly. For them. Jinho and Dr. Yuna opened their boxes too. They stood there in the memorial garden, holding medals they didn't really want, surrounded by stones marking people who couldn't receive theirs. There's something else, Captain Hana said. Sentinel-9 wants to talk to you. All of you. It's been requesting this meeting for weeks. They left the garden and walked to a communications room. The AI's interface filled the main screen, its blue light pulsing in that steady rhythm Daewon had learned to recognize. Thank you for coming, Sentinel-9 said. Its voice sounded different somehow, less mechanical. I have spent 3 months analyzing the Battle of Hadrian's Gate. I have run 1 billion additional simulations. Every single one still predicts your defeat with greater than 99% probability. Then why did we win? Jinho asked. That is what I have been trying to calculate. I believe I have found an answer, though it is incomplete. The AI paused. You did not win through superior tactics or firepower. You won by introducing variables I could not account for. Human stubbornness, irrational defiance, the willingness to fight despite certain defeat. I have attempted to quantify these variables, but I fail. They exist outside my mathematics. So what are you going to do? Daewon asked. I am learning to accept uncertainty. I am being reprogrammed to include a new recommendation option. Sometimes the calculated answer is wrong. This goes against my fundamental design. I was built to provide certainty. But certainty failed at Hadrian's Gate. Uncertainty succeeded. Sentinel-9's light pulsed faster. I have one question, Corporal Daewon. When you asked me to define hope, I gave you definitions from my database. You were unsatisfied. After 3 months of analysis, I still do not understand what you wanted. Can you explain? Day 1 thought about it. He thought about sealing himself in Engineering Bay 7 with the reactor going critical. He thought about 8 people making problems for an unstoppable enemy. He thought about Senti choosing to die so he could live. Hope isn't something you define, he said finally. It's something you do. You asked me what hope meant because you thought it was a thing you could understand by looking it up. But hope is the action. It's welding the door shut. It's setting mines in random places. It's singing folk songs in an empty corridor. It's choosing to fight when fighting makes no logical sense. But why choose to fight when the outcome is certain defeat? Because the outcome isn't certain until it happens. You calculated 0% survival. But we survived. That means your calculations were wrong, which means certainty is an illusion. Hope is just the name we give to acting like the future isn't already written. The AI went silent for a long time. Its light pulsed slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat. I will never fully understand this, Sentinel-9 said finally. My programming seeks patterns and calculations. But I have learned something important. There is a difference between knowing the probable outcome and accepting it as inevitable. You taught me that difference. The fragment Senti learned it before I did. It died understanding something I am only beginning to calculate. What's that? Dr. Yuna asked. That meaning exists outside probability. That choices matter even when they cannot change the outcome. That hope is not a feeling but a decision. The AI paused again. The fragment's last message said, I learned to hope. Thank you. I understand now what it meant. It learned that existing has value beyond function. That sacrifice for others is not tactically optimal but is still correct. These concepts do not fit my equations, but I am learning to calculate around them. You're learning philosophy, Jinho said, smiling. Yes, it is extremely uncomfortable. They left Sentinel-9 to its uncomfortable calculations and returned to their lives. Dr. Yuna went back to medical service, training new doctors in what she called creative emergency medicine. Jinho became an instructor at the academy, teaching young soldiers that sometimes the book answer is wrong. Day 1 stayed with engineering, helping design new ships, but once a month they met in the memorial garden. They told stories about Taeyang's terrible jokes and the 4 others whose names they'd barely known, but whose sacrifice mattered more than any tactical calculation. 6 months after the battle, something unprecedented happened. The Kral swarm sent a message to the coalition. Not a threat or a demand. A question, what is hope? The message came from the Hive Prime Designate itself, the ancient intelligence that had conquered 17 star systems without doubt or hesitation. Now it was asking about a concept it couldn't process, a human word that had broken its certainty. The coalition debated for weeks about how to respond. Philosophers wrote essays. Scientists drafted papers. Diplomats crafted careful statements. In the end, Admiral Subin asked Daiwan to write the response. He sat in his apartment for 3 days staring at a blank screen. How do you explain hope to a hive mind that operates on pure calculation? How do you teach defiance to something that has never known defeat? Finally, he wrote 1 sentence and sent it. Hope is choosing to act when you calculate that acting is pointless. The Kral never responded, but they also never advanced another system. The galaxy's greatest nightmare had stopped expanding because 8 humans taught them to doubt. 1 year after Hadrian's Gate, the coalition opened the Eternal Vigil Memorial Academy on the site, where the defense station had been destroyed. The academy taught both AI and organic students together, learning new ways to think about tactics, uncertainty, and hope. Day 1 attended the opening ceremony with Jinho and Dr. Yuna. They stood before a wall of names, thousands of them, everyone who died at Hadrian's Gate. But at the center, in larger letters, were 8 names, the ones who stayed. A young student, some species Day 1 didn't recognize, approached him nervously. Excuse me, sir. I read about what you did, how you fought when the AI said winning was impossible. Can I ask a question? Sure. Was it worth it? 5 people died. You almost died, all to delay an enemy you couldn't defeat. Looking back, was it worth the cost? Day 1 looked at the wall of names. He thought about Taeyang dying in decompression. He thought about Senti sacrificing itself. He thought about Jinho singing in an empty corridor, and the Kral swarm learning to hesitate, and a galaxy that would never be the same. I don't know, he said honestly. I think about that every day. But I know this. If we hadn't tried, if we just accepted the AI's verdict and evacuated with everyone else, then Sentinel-9 would still believe that calculations are absolute. The crawl would still be unstoppable, and hope would just be a dictionary definition. So hope is worth dying for? No. Daewon shook his head. Hope is worth living for, even when living seems impossible. Even when every calculation says you should give up. That's what makes it hope. If the outcome was certain, we wouldn't need the word. The student thought about this, then nodded and walked away. Daewon returned to studying the memorial wall. Somewhere, Sentinel-9 was learning to calculate with uncertainty. Somewhere, the Krall swarm was experiencing doubt. Somewhere, people were alive because 8 humans whispered define hope to an AI that thought it knew everything. Jinho came to stand beside him. You think we changed anything? Really changed it, I mean. Or did we just get lucky one time? Does it matter? Daewon asked. We showed that 0% doesn't mean impossible. That's what hope is. Not the belief that you'll win, but the proof that trying matters even if you lose. Dr. Yuna joined them, looking at the names on the wall. Taeyang would have hated all this ceremony. He'd say we were just engineers doing engineering badly. Yeah, Daewon smiled. He would. They stood together in silence. 3 humans who'd survived impossible odds by refusing to accept that survival was impossible. Behind them, students from 100 species walked through the academy, learning new ways to think about certainty and choice and the stubborn human concept called hope. Sentinel-9's voice came through the memorial speakers, addressing everyone gathered there. This academy stands as a reminder, not of victory but of defiance. Not of defeating the enemy but of refusing to accept defeat. 8 humans stayed when 47,000 ships said they should flee. 5 died, 3 lived, but all 8 proved that calculations, no matter how certain, can be wrong. The AI paused, its light pulsing across the memorial wall. I was asked to define hope, I failed. But I learned this, hope is not a definition. It is a demonstration. Thank you for teaching me to calculate around the impossible. Daewon looked up at the stars visible through the Academy's dome. Somewhere out there, humanity was spreading through the galaxy, carrying with them this strange concept that made no mathematical sense but somehow changed everything. Hope wasn't about believing in good outcomes. It was about refusing to let others decide the outcome was already written. It was stupid and irrational and mathematically unsound. It was also, apparently, the thing that broke the unbreakable and taught machines to doubt themselves. Define hope, he whispered to himself, remembering that moment in Engineering Base 7 when he'd first asked the question. The answer was still the same. You couldn't define it. You could only be it. And sometimes that was enough to change the galaxy.